You can learn a lot about a person by playing tennis with them. As a rule, I've noticed that guys who act like gentlemen on the tennis court behave the same way in life. Conversely, I saw one guy demonstrate the worst sports skills I've ever seen while playing with his best friend. Later, I wasn't surprised when that guy abandoned his family and ran off with another man's wife. Then there's Frank Calhoun. Frank is a big guy who played soccer at Georgia Tech until he injured his knee. After an orthopedist fixed him up, Frank switched to tennis. But he plays tennis like a soccer player. Powerful serves and backhand shots, but I can beat him. I like to come up to the net and put pressure on him so he can't get past me. Most of the time, he overdoes it and the ball bounces off the backhand line. And don't get me started on his serves. Let's just say that when he chooses a line, he always prefers it to be in his favor. As a result, Frank always wants to play me. He just can't lose to the little guy. I'm not little, I'm 6 feet tall. But I'm pretty skinny and wiry, which makes me small compared to Frank, who is 3 inches taller and 75 pounds heavier than me. Not surprisingly, I don't really want to play with Frank, but it's hard to avoid since we both live in the Eden Point neighborhood north of Atlanta. Since Atlanta is a big tennis town, our neighborhood was built around a club with a pool and lots of tennis courts. With so many people playing in the Atlanta Lawn Tennis Association League, it's pretty hard to avoid someone like Frank. But there is good news. I play with many very nice people. For example, my mixed doubles partner, Penny Pennington. I met Penny through my wife, Melanie. Melanie is a Pilates instructor, and many people who live in Eden Point attend her studio, including Penny. Unfortunately for me, Melanie isn't into tennis, but when she heard that Penny was looking for a partner, she introduced us, and Penny and I have been playing together for about a year now. The club where we played today's match was in Stone Mountain, so I offered to give Penny a ride to save gas. Considering the traffic on Saturday afternoons, we allowed ourselves 45 minutes to get there. As she pulled out onto the road, I wondered once again why Penny wasn't married. Part of the reason was that she had lost her husband in a car accident 3 years ago. After a long period of mourning, one of the ways she coped with her grief was to attend Melanie's Pilates classes. Another way was to take up tennis again, which she had played in school. All this exercise had resulted in a fit, slim, dark-haired woman in her 30s. I expected a beautiful woman like Penny to attract suitors like flies to honey. But she kept telling Melanie that she just hadn't found the right man. "Hi, Penny," I greeted her when she opened the door of my car. "Are you ready to get them today?" She grinned. "I'm very ready, Michael. I've been wanting to get revenge on those guys for a long time." We discussed our strategy for the match as I pulled onto the I-285, but I was interrupted by my cell phone ringing. "Hi, Robert. You've got to be kidding me." "No, everything's fine here." "Damn. Okay, let's reschedule for another day." Penny watched me with a puzzled look as I turned onto the next exit ramp and headed home. "It was our rival," I told her. "He said it had just rained and the courts were unplayable." Atlanta is known for downpours that can flood one part of the city while the sun is shining brightly just a few miles away. Penny was visibly disappointed. "Damn, I was really looking forward to playing today." "Listen," I said, "why don't we go back to the club? We can practice, and maybe there'll be someone there who wants to play." As we approached the main entrance to Eden Point, I turned onto the road leading to my house. "I just want to stop and pick up my check for the club dues for this quarter," I told Penny. "I won't be long." I parked at the curb and hurried to the front door. I had written the check last night and left it on the dresser, so I knew where to find it. But as I walked down the hall, I heard noises coming from the master bedroom, noises I shouldn't have heard. "Oh, please do that again." Yes, just like that. "Oh." It was Melanie's voice. "What the hell?" I tiptoed down the hallway and peeked through the door. Melanie was lying naked on the bed with her legs spread wide apart. Between them, a man was crouched over her, taking possession of her mouth and hands while she moaned and gasped for air. I felt like I had been in a car accident. I was stunned, unable to move, unable to think. Everything had suddenly changed, and I couldn't understand what was happening. Then the man stood up and lifted Melanie's legs high to facilitate penetration. "No, this can't be," I thought, recognizing Frank Calhoun's figure. I heard her moan as he entered her. Then she groaned, "Oh God, oh yes, oh God." I recoiled from the door as if I had been punched. It was too much to bear. My first impulse was to burst into the room and attack him. But what good would that do? I asked myself desperately. They had already betrayed me, and fighting him wouldn't change anything. Besides, even if I managed to land the first blow, he was so much bigger than me that he would still be able to beat me half to death. But I didn't want him to get away with it. Freezing in place, I suddenly remembered that Penny was waiting for me in the car. Damn, I have to take her home first before coming back here and getting into a fight with them, I thought. In a daze, I walked back down the hallway and out the front door. I felt like I was going to throw up at any second. I looked up and saw Penny watching me through the car window. A moment later, I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. I don't know what I looked like, but it couldn't have been good. Are you okay, Michael? Penny asked, looking at me with concern. I couldn't speak. I gripped the steering wheel tightly and drove toward Penny's house. When we got to the house, I parked the car and without looking at her said, I'm sorry, Penny, but I can't go with you tonight. What's wrong, Michael? What's wrong? She asked with growing concern. When I didn't answer, she reached over and turned off the ignition, then took the keys, got out of the car, and walked over to my door. I turned to face her. I have to go, Penny. Please, give me back the keys. No, she said firmly. Not until you tell me what happened. When I didn't say anything, she opened the car door and pulled me by the arm. You're not going anywhere until you come inside and tell me what's going on. Robotically, I got out of the car and let her lead me into the house. She disappeared for a second and came back with a glass of ice water. I absent-mindedly took a sip while she watched me. When I put the glass down, she took my hand and squeezed it in hers. Tell me, Michael, what happened out there? Suddenly, all my resistance collapsed and I leaned back against the back of her couch. I tried to speak, but my throat suddenly tightened again and I took another sip of water. It was Melanie and Frank, I said tensely. She looked at me blankly. Go on, she said. They were there together, in our bedroom. They were, I whispered. She sighed. No, that can't be. Melanie would never do that. The image of the two of them came back to me with full force, and I felt a tear run down my face. I never thought she would do that either, I croaked, feeling the pain in my throat intensify. Maybe it was something else, Michael? Maybe you're wrong, she asked. I knew she was trying to help, but it didn't stop my anger. When I looked into the room, she was lying on her back. When I left, he started having sex with her. So tell me, Penny, am I wrong? She flinched at my angry sarcasm. I'm sorry, Michael, I didn't doubt you. I just hoped there was some other explanation. A new wave of pain pierced me. And with Frank Calhoun, I said angrily. And how could she let that big ape get to her? I guess that explains why Frank started going to Melanie's Pilates class, Penny mused. He went to her classes, I exclaimed. She never told me about that. She never told me about that. My anger was still boiling. Thanks a lot for letting me know, I said bitterly. Now Penny was hurt. That's not fair, Michael. I had no idea there was anything between them. I'm sorry, Penny, I said. I didn't mean to lash out at you. It's just really hard for me right now. She squeezed my hand. It's okay, Michael. I can only imagine how you feel right now. I stood up. I have to go, I told her. I have to go back there and find out what's really going on. You're not going to do anything crazy, Michael? No, I just need some answers. She squeezed my hand. Please, please let me know what's going on, Michael, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help. I thanked her and returned to my car. As I drove home, I thought with dread about what awaited me. I went over all the questions I wanted to ask her and tried to anticipate her possible reactions. I expected tears, denial, and angry words. How should I respond? What about Frank? What if he was still there? I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my body. When I walked through the kitchen door, Melanie must have heard me because she came out to meet me. She was wearing a bathrobe and her hair was wrapped in a towel. You're back early, she said cheerfully. How was the game? We got caught in the rain, I said in a broken voice. I'm sorry you couldn't play, she said. Penny must have been disappointed. I just stared at her. I didn't feel like making small talk. They called about the rain right after we left, I said quietly. She blinked, but her expression didn't change. I went back to the house, I told her. My heart was racing. I saw you and Frank together. Of all the scenarios I had imagined, Melanie's reaction was not what I had expected. I'm sorry you had to see that, she said in an even tone. That's all you can say? I asked incredulously. You're cheating on me and you're sorry I had to witness it. You're not even going to apologize for sleeping with him? How long has this been going on? Don't you have any explanation? She crossed her arms and sighed. Sit down, Michael, she said. gesturing toward the table in the breakfast room. I'd rather stand, I said angrily. Get dressed, she said and sat back down in her chair. I stood there stunned by her complete lack of reaction. Oh, listen, Michael, we were going to tell you about this soon anyway, but I guess this just pushes it back a little. I'm leaving you. Frank and I love each other, and I'm moving in with him. We're going to get married as soon as the divorce is final. I decided to dodge the blow, not risking a fall. Before I could say anything, she jumped up, said, "Wait here," and disappeared into our bedroom. She returned a few minutes later, clutching a stack of papers. She handed them to me across the table. "This doesn't have to be sarcastic," she said. "I don't even want alimony from you. I've taken all the money out of our savings account, but that's only fair since I'm leaving you the house. It's much better than what you'd get if we went to court, but I don't mind if you sign the papers and let us move on." I looked at the stack of papers. It was a divorce petition. "Have you already been to a lawyer?" I asked in surprise. "What about our marriage? What happened to the last 10 years we spent together?" "I'm very sorry, Michael. I didn't plan this, it just happened. Just accept it. This is how it is." "Accept?" I exclaimed. "Accept that my beloved wife is having sex with that asshole Frank Calhoun in our own bed? Accept that our marriage is over?" She stood up. "I'm disappointed, Michael. I was hoping for a more mature response from you." She turned and walked into the bedroom. I sat at my desk staring at the divorce papers in front of me, trying to make sense of what was happening. If someone had asked me that morning, I would have said that I loved my wife and that we had a good marriage. And this afternoon, I found out that she was leaving me for another man. Let's talk about cognitive dissonance. In the silence, I heard the buzz of a cell phone, followed by snatches of conversation. "He saw us, just as I expected. That would have been nice." When she returned, she was fully dressed and carrying an overnight bag and a set of cosmetics. "Since you brought it up, I'm not staying here tonight. Frank is coming to pick me up. We'll come back on Monday when you're at work and get the rest of my things." "So you're leaving, just like that?" "That's the way it has to be," she said. "Fine," I said bitterly. "What do you want me to tell our friends?" She sighed. "Listen, Michael, Frank and I haven't done anything wrong, and we're not going to hide like criminals. We're going to continue our active social life. In fact, we're probably going to a reception at Eden Point tomorrow evening. You don't have to tell anyone anything because everyone already knows about it." At that moment, a horn sounded outside. Melanie looked out the window. "Frank's here," she said. "I'm leaving." Closing the door, she leaned back and looked at me. "Just sign the papers, Michael. The sooner you do it, the better it will be for all of us." Then she left. I don't know how long I sat there. Emotions raged inside me like train cars speeding through an intersection. One minute I was boiling with anger, the next I was remembering happy times, and the next I was sad. I told myself that I treated her like a queen, and then I wondered what I had done to push her away. "I'm better off without her," I repeated, until loneliness overwhelmed me. The ring of my cell phone startled me, and I quickly answered the call. Subconsciously, I hoped to hear Melanie's voice, but it was Penny. "What's wrong, Michael?" she asked. "Not very well," I replied. "She dumped me." "I heard," she said. "You heard?" I said in amazement. "Where? How?" "I'm so sorry, Michael," she said sadly. "Frank bragged about it at the club." "Oh, damn," I thought. "This is starting." On Sunday, I called the captain of our men's team. I didn't want to go out on the field. "I'm sorry, Joe," I told him. "You'll have to take me off the roster today. I have some personal issues to deal with." "Yeah, I heard," he said sympathetically. "That's too bad. Good luck." I thanked him, but I knew I'd be lucky. I spent the rest of the day at home. I was probably hiding, although I hated to admit it. Sports were on TV, but I didn't pay any attention. My thoughts kept returning to my marriage to Melanie. Why did it all go wrong? When did she stop loving me? I was sure she had fallen in love with me when she married me right after college. We hadn't been apart for the entire senior year. I proposed to her during Christmas break. She majored in physical education and health, and whenever my fraternity brothers saw her in her workout clothes, they would tease me. She was cute, fit, and sexy, which was almost irresistible. I gave up trying as soon as I met her. We settled into married life easily. I got a great job in Atlanta, and she got a job as an aerobics instructor. After a few years, we saved enough money for a down payment on a house and found what we were looking for, in a new complex called Eden Point. I felt that here in Eden Point we were truly happy. I got several promotions at my company, and Melanie decided to start her own business. By then, we had enough money to rent a space for her studio in one of the small shopping centers in the area, and her business was doing very well. Our savings account was growing. We had made many friends and acquaintances, especially in Eden Point, and we even started talking about starting a family in a year or two. Our sex life had slowed down a bit, but that didn't surprise me. My job was keeping me busy, and the daily Pilates classes would have worn anyone out. Looking back on it all, I began to realize that things had really slowed down over the past 6 months, although I hadn't noticed it at the time. I also remembered that Melanie sometimes seemed a little distracted, as if she were in another world. But when we made love, I felt better than ever, and I thought Melanie felt the same way. Obviously, I was wrong. I mentally berated myself. How could I have been so blind that I didn't realize she had another man? How could I not have known that she had fallen out of love with me and fallen in love with Frank Calhoun? The only thing I could assume was that when you love and trust someone, you don't look for signs of betrayal and deception. No, I thought sardonically, you just have to wait until they hit you over the head. On Monday, I went to work early to try to stay ahead of events. Around 9 o'clock, I called my lawyer's office and tried to arrange a meeting. When the secretary asked the purpose of the meeting, I didn't want to bring up Melanie, so I told her I needed to make some changes to my will. When she came back on the line, she said she could see me right after lunch. When I arrived at his law office, Jonathan met me in the lobby. He was a classmate of ours when we were students, and I turned to him when Melanie and I decided to draw up our wills. When we settled into his office, he looked at me with concern. "Is everything all right, Michael? I understand you need to make some changes to your will. You or Melanie aren't ill, are you?" "Thanks for your concern, Jonathan, but it's not that bad," I told him. Then I handed him the papers Melanie had given me on Saturday. As he read them, he muttered to himself. When he finished, he looked up at me. "I'm very sorry to hear that, Michael. Do you think there's any chance of reconciliation?" "I don't think so. She's already moved out of our house and moved in with her boyfriend. She told me they plan to get married as soon as our divorce is final." He shook his head. "I didn't expect that. You two seemed like the perfect couple." Then his expression changed and his voice took on a professional tone. Given the circumstances, as your legal advisor, I advise you to sign this agreement immediately." "So 10 years of marriage are just going to go down the drain?" I said bitterly. He shook his head patiently. "In matters like this, Michael, you have to stop thinking with your heart and start thinking with your head. I believe Melanie has made you a very generous offer, much better than what you will get if you decide to fight for her. She may be partly motivated by guilt, but I'm willing to bet that the main reason is to give you an incentive to say yes as soon as possible so she can marry her new man. Although it may seem like you're giving in to her now, the truth is that if your marriage falls apart, it's the best thing you can hope for." I knew he was right. Hell, after what she did, I didn't want to stay married to her anyway, but I still felt like she and Frank had played me in a game I didn't even know I was in. Jonathan's tone became sympathetic again. "Listen, Michael, I know the lawyer Melanie used. If you sign, we can get this settlement agreement into court quickly. It will state what she offered. Then, if she changes her mind and wants to come back, and you're willing to accept that, you'll have 30 days to withdraw the divorce." I knew that wouldn't happen. "Can I borrow your pen?" I asked. When I got back to the office, I headed straight to Human Resources. I had to make a lot of changes to my health insurance, 401k plan, and a bunch of other spousal benefits. The clerk who helped me must have done this a lot because he quickly got all the forms ready. As I signed them, I looked up and saw him looking at me. "Looks like I won't have to make an announcement at the office after all," I thought sarcastically. On my way home that evening, I stopped at a nearby restaurant and picked up some dinner. But when I got home, I found that Melanie had been there during the day and had gathered everything she wanted. Of course, all her cosmetics were gone, but I was surprised to find several items of clothing left behind. Upon closer inspection, I realized that these were things she no longer wore. "I guess I'll have to take them to Goodwill," I thought gloomily. Further investigation revealed that the bedroom wasn't the only place she had raided. Our nice china was gone, as were most of the serving pieces we had received as wedding gifts. In the kitchen, I noticed that the dishes and a set of good cutting knives were gone. Several pieces of furniture were missing, and when I went into the living room, I saw that most of our CD and DVD collections were gone too. Going through our things, I noticed that she had left our wedding album untouched. For some reason, this depressed me more than all the things she had taken with her. It was as if she wanted to erase all memories of her life with me. I went back to the kitchen and hid the food I had bought in the refrigerator. After her intrusion, I had lost my appetite. I made a mental note to change the locks. Damn it! How can you go from being a happily married man to a lonely divorcee in 3 days? I asked myself. I asked myself, I asked myself, I asked myself. It all seemed so damn unfair. I spent the next week in virtual isolation, arriving at work early and leaving late every day. The rest of the time I stayed at home. The humiliation of Frank Calhoun taking my wife away from me was agonizing, and the fact that I couldn't do anything about it was almost unbearable. I admit I had fantasies of attacks with baseball bats or brass knuckles. Sometimes I dreamed of assassins and car bombs. But then I would return to reality. Did I really want to ruin my own life to get back at a womanizer and a wife who couldn't keep her legs together? By Friday, I decided it was time to come out of my cocoon. I hadn't done anything wrong, and I had no reason to hide. I called Penny. Hey, partner, aren't we supposed to play tennis this weekend? I asked, trying to sound cheerful and positive. Oh, Michael, I'm so glad to hear from you, she said quickly. I thought about calling you so many times, but I decided you'd be better off alone. Thanks, Penny, I replied, softening my tone. It's been a tough week. I told her everything that had happened, then asked what had happened in Eden Point that I had missed. She hesitated for a few seconds before admitting that our situation was the talk of the neighborhood. Do you think they could find something better to talk about? I said sharply. Maybe they will, Penny agreed. But Frank and Melanie are going through a tough time right now. They've been hanging out at the club every night since last Saturday. Frank almost openly brags about who wins and who's better, and Melanie clings to him like a lovesick schoolgirl. I could hear the anger in her voice. It's just disgusting, Michael. I quit her Pilates class right away and told her I couldn't be her friend anymore, she said. Her loyalty made me feel a little better. What about the others, Penny? What are they saying? I asked. I think it's what you expected, Michael. There are those who are very unhappy with Frank and Melanie, and they try to avoid the lovebirds as much as possible. And then there's a group that always hangs around Frank. They extol his virtues, if you know what I mean. But for most people, it's just a sad, awkward situation, and they try to stay as far away from it as possible. Rationally, I knew that's how it would be, but part of me wanted society to tear and feather Frank and Melanie and run them out of town on a rail. But I was determined not to let my disappointment hold me back. For that matter, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life underground, I told Penny. We have a game scheduled for Saturday, and unless you want to, I intend to take the court with my partner, I told her. I'm glad, Michael, she said warmly. You can count on me. I deliberately arrived at the tennis court a little late to avoid talking about things I didn't want to discuss. It didn't help much. As I approached the tennis pavilion, I felt the stares of my neighbors and teammates. I could understand their curiosity, but I still hated the feeling. When he saw me, the captain of our mixed doubles team rushed over to me. Michael, I'm really sorry. The other team made a last-minute change to their lineup, and some matches have already started, so there's nothing I can do. If you don't want to play, I understand. What are you talking about, Mary? I asked. I don't understand. It's Frank, she said. You and Penny have to play Frank and his partner. Damn, I thought. That's the last thing I want to do. At that moment, Penny came over, and when she realized what was happening, her face turned pale. She pulled me aside and whispered, We shouldn't do this, Michael. It's no big deal. We'll just lose and play with someone else next week. No, I said loudly enough for Penny to jump. I'm not going to hide from this bastard for the rest of my life. I have to face him, and I'd better start right now. Penny shot me a worried look, but I turned back to Mary. It's okay, I told her. Penny and I are here to play. We're here to play. It was a massacre. I was playing worse than I had in years, and my obvious emotions were affecting Penny. Frank, on the other hand, was on top of his game, and his powerful ground strokes were firing off the net like RPGs. To make matters worse, he was constantly trash-talking me throughout the match. Come on, Michael, you can hit harder, he shouted after I hit a weak shot that he returned. Another time he yelled, Your wife can hit harder. Wait, I was wrong. You don't have a wife. I was furious. On top of that, a crowd had gathered to watch our little match, and I looked up to see Melanie standing at the fence. To her credit, she grumbled at some of Frank's comments, but she never once looked in my direction. At one point, I lobbed a weak second serve over the net, and Frank hit it right at Penny. It bounced off her shoulder and nearly knocked her over. I rushed toward the net with my racket clenched, ready to decapitate the bastard, but Penny grabbed my arm and begged me not to go after him. "It was a fair shot," she said. "I'm fine, I'm not hurt. It's just part of that game." I glared at him with venom in my eyes as he pretended to tie his shoelaces. Finally, I returned to my seat in anger and disappointment. The final score was 6-2, 6-1, a humiliating defeat. Gritting my teeth, I walked over to the net to shake hands with our opponents. Frank's partner seemed embarrassed by his performance and apologized after shaking my hand. Frank, however, simply walked over to us and without bothering to extend his hand said, "That was a lot of fun. Let's do it again next time you feel like fooling around." Then he turned away ostentatiously, walked over to Melanie, and kissed her firmly through the waist-high fence. I don't know what Penny saw on my face, but she grabbed my arm and dragged me away from the playground. "He's trying to provoke you, Michael. He wants you to start a fight with him. Don't let him get to you. Please, for my sake." I sat down on the podium and someone handed me a glass of ice water. I took a few sips and then poured the rest over my head. I couldn't have felt worse than I did that day. I apologized to Penny for playing so badly, and even though she protested, I got in the car and drove home. Throwing my clothes in the laundry basket, I dragged myself into the shower and splashed water on myself for half an hour. When the water finally cooled down, I got out, dried myself off, and collapsed on the bed, angry and disgusted. I knew why I had lost. I had let Frank get the better of me. That knowledge only made me feel worse. He had gotten to me, and to Melanie too, though obviously in a different way. But the result was the same, turning a loser like Frank into a big winner. I vowed to myself that I wasn't going to take Frank's abuse anymore, and Melanie's either. I would find a way to break them both. I just had to figure out how. I lay down on my bed and thought about what my old tennis coach had told me. Play to your opponent's weaknesses. It sounded good in theory, but how could I apply that to this situation? I know myself. Once I start working on a problem, my brain keeps attacking it, even when I switch to other tasks. In fact, I often found that if I left a problem alone for a while, I could easily find a solution when I returned to it. That's what happened in this case. I thought about the problem for a while, then put it aside to spend most of Sunday finishing up some yard work I'd been neglecting. By evening, I was so tired that I had no trouble falling asleep. When I went to work the next day, I realized I had a possible solution. It'll probably be expensive, I thought to myself, but if it works, it'll be worth it. Around mid-morning, I called one of our best salespeople. "Hi, Jerry," I said when I picked up the phone. "Would you like to have lunch with me today? My treat." "Sure, Michael, especially if you're buying." We met at a grill bar I knew, which was a little run down but had great food. After we ordered, Jerry looked at me. "Hey, Michael. I was sorry to hear about you and Melanie. I thought things were going well for you." "Yeah, me too, Jerry, me too. But that's actually why I wanted to talk to you." "Sure, Michael. I'll be happy to help in any way I can." "Okay, Jerry. Here's my question. When you entertain your best clients, do you ever use the services of an escort?" He looked at me strangely. "No, Michael, absolutely not. It's against company policy and I would never do such a thing." I leaned across the table toward him. "Jerry, this isn't company business and we're not here for work. This is strictly personal, if you know what I mean." He looked at me for a few seconds, then a spark lit up in his eyes. "I understand." "Oh, I understand," he said. "I guess it's been a long dry spell for you, what with your wife leaving and you not dating or anything." He paused, then leaned closer to me. "Of course, I know one of the best services in town. But listen, Michael, they only serve the biggest players, you know? Their girls are incredible, but I think they might be out of your price range." I smiled at him. "I'll take care of that. Just tell me how to contact them and what to expect." And over burgers and beer, that's exactly what he did. After lunch, I nervously reviewed the notes I had taken during lunch. I hoped I was doing everything right. Then I remembered how Frank had mocked me, how Melanie had coldly announced she was leaving, and I decided to take action. I dialed the number Jerry had given me, and a pleasant male voice answered. "Hello, can I help you?" "Yes, I'd like to speak to Mr. Henry Miller," I said as if on cue. "This is Mr. Miller," the voice replied. "What are you looking for?" "Something from Grove Press," I replied. "Please give me your name, sir." I considered using a pseudonym, but Jerry had made it clear that I should give my real name. "They're always worried about the Vice Squad," he told me. They'll do everything they can to make sure you're not a cop trying to set them up. I gave him my real name. Are you calling from your office? Mr. Miller asked. Yes, I replied. But this is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with my company. I understand, sir. Now, could you give me the switchboard number where you work? Certainly, I said. But would you like my direct phone number? No, he replied. I'll call the main number and ask for you. Then we can get on with your business. Very clever, I thought to myself. If he called and got the operator, he would know he was calling a real company and not a police station. And if she transferred his call to me, he would realize I was actually an employee of the company. It's no protection against a fool, of course, but it's not bad. I gave him the number for the main switchboard, and he hung up immediately. A few minutes later, my phone rang, and the operator transferred the call to me. It was Mr. Miller. Then he asked for my cell phone number. That will allow us to contact you after hours if necessary, he explained. After I gave him my cell phone number, he continued. Now that we've gotten the identification out of the way, he said, please tell us how our service can help you. I'm looking for a very special companion who would be available for several jobs spread out over a month or more. Said the voice. That's a little unusual. We don't usually take on commitments for such a long period. We may be able to help you, but it will be expensive. He quoted a price that brought tears to my eyes. I swallowed. Everything will be fine, Miss Miller. Very well. Do you have any special requirements? Yes, I said. She must look like a goddess. He smiled. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, sir. But I think you'll be able to find a companion to your liking. He paused. Do you have a pen handy? When I assured him that I did, he gave me the address of their website. I noticed that the URL began with HTTPS, which meant secure server. When I entered it, to my surprise, it told me that I had to enter Anais Nin when asked for a username. He then gave me a numeric password. Please understand, sir, that your username and password will be changed after you make your selection. This is for your safety and ours. When I confirmed my understanding, he continued. Now about payment, sir. As soon as you make your selection and the session is scheduled, your credit card will be charged the amount you just agreed to. In addition, our clients are expected to express their appreciation directly to our companions. If you are satisfied with everything, we recommend leaving a 25% tip. I did some quick mental calculations. That should work, I thought. Otherwise, I'll not only be ruined but humiliated. Very good, sir. When you are ready to make your selection, please visit our website. There you can make all the other arrangements. Good day, sir. Then the line went dead. I waited until evening when I got home to visit the website Henry had given me. The main screen simply said Capricorn Services, with the tagline, "We satisfy the needs of the most discerning clients." Using the username and password Henry had given me, I logged in and was greeted by a window that could have come straight out of the pages of a Victoria's Secret catalog. All the women pictured there were so gorgeous that I wondered why they weren't working in modeling instead of the escort business. In fact, I even wondered if the photos had been copied from some modeling website as part of a scam. But my buddy Jerry insisted that the Capricorns were real, so I decided to take a chance. I figured I'd go for a blonde, but then a photo of a woman with shoulder-length dark hair caught my eye, and I impulsively clicked on Rhiannon. The confirmation that appeared on the screen assured me that Rhiannon would contact me within 24 hours to arrange our meeting. I was then asked to enter my credit card details. Once the card number and expiry date had been verified, the screen went black and I was suddenly kicked off the site. Out of curiosity, I tried to log back into the Capricorn website, but this time the welcome screen didn't recognize my username and password, and after a second attempt, I was kicked back to the homepage. I was impressed by the security of their system and thought it was a promising sign. If they went to such lengths, perhaps their service was as good as Jerry had claimed. I spent the next day on edge, waiting for Rhiannon's call. At one point, I even considered backing out of the deal. My little plan was supposed to cost a lot of money, and there was no guarantee it would work. But when I walked into the break room to get a cup of coffee, the two secretaries who had been talking when I entered immediately fell silent and turned away from me. It didn't take a genius to figure out who they were talking about. The pain of being the subject of office gossip strengthened my resolve. No matter what, I wasn't going to remain a helpless victim if I could do something about it. It was only after dinner that my cell phone rang, and when I answered, a melodious voice said, "Hi, Michael. This is Rhiannon calling. I look forward to seeing you." I swallowed and replied, suggesting we meet for dinner to discuss my request. When she agreed, I suggested the same grill where Jerry and I had had dinner. It was small, dark, and far enough from Eden Point that I was unlikely to run into any of my neighbors. She laughed. "How interesting. I don't think I've ever had dinner there. I look forward to seeing you." With that, she hung up. Well, that's that, I thought. It wasn't too crowded at the grill on a weekday, which was one of the reasons I chose this place, and the dim lighting also suited my purposes. But when she walked in, it was as if a spotlight had been turned on her. She saw me standing up nervously, walked over, and shook my hand confidently. "Hello, Michael," she said in her musical voice. "It's very nice to meet you in person." She sat down, and I followed her. I must have been staring at her because she laughed and said, "How do I look?" We've all seen movie stars on the big screen or models in magazines. They're gorgeous, but they're not real. But now I had met one in person, and the impression was overwhelming. The young woman sitting across from me was simply stunning. Dark eyes, high cheekbones, full lips, hair framing her face, athletic but feminine figure. I could go on, but the fact remains. For a few moments, all I did was stare at her in silent amazement. She smiled and broke the silence. "I take it you approve of me," she said. "Oh yes, I'm sorry," I stammered. My voice trailed off in embarrassment. Fortunately, at that moment, the waitress came over to take our orders. I don't even remember what I ordered, but Rhiannon settled on a green salad with dressing on the side. While the waitress was writing down her order, I realized that she too had fallen under Rhiannon's spell. She kept glancing at her until she finally muttered, "Aren't you on TV?" Rhiannon smiled sweetly at her. "No, I'm afraid not," she said, and the waitress walked away, muttering to herself. Their brief exchange allowed the rational part of my brain to kick back in. I looked at Rhiannon curiously. "I bet this happens to you a lot." She nodded unconsciously. "Yes, it happens a lot." "Can I ask you a question? Why don't you work in television or modeling instead of—" I asked, pausing slightly at the end. "I've thought about it," she admitted, "but it's a very cruel world. I may look good, but I'm just one of many in this world. The chances of success are about the same as a basketball player making it to the NBA. But in this field, I stand out. And unlike the modeling or acting business, I didn't have to starve for years paying my dues. From the very beginning of my career, I maximized my earnings. By the time my looks start to fade, I'll have enough money saved up to live off my investments for the rest of my life. And if I'm really lucky, I'll find a rich man who wants a trophy wife and doesn't care what she does for a living." I couldn't help but nod. I didn't agree with the career she had chosen, but she had approached it sensibly. At that moment, the waitress brought our dinners. After serving Rhiannon, she looked at her again and said, "Are you sure you're not on TV? I'm sure I've seen you before." Rhiannon shook her head. "I don't think so. If I had, I would have remembered." I tried to suppress a laugh as the waitress hurried away. When we started eating, she looked at me intently. "So, Michael, why don't you tell me what's on your mind? Henry said it was something unusual." I blushed and began to tell her my story. When I recounted my conversation with Melanie after I caught her in bed with Frank, Rhiannon gave me a sympathetic look. "That was pretty cold," she said. When I told her about Frank Calhoun and how he had behaved, she nodded understandingly. "I've met a lot of people like him." She wiped her mouth and folded her hands on the table. "So what exactly do you want to do and how do I fit into the picture?" I spent the next 15 minutes describing what I hoped to achieve in the next month or so. When I finished, I admitted that I had a lot of doubts about what I was trying to achieve. But I couldn't just sit back and let those two treat me badly without putting up a fight. "Now that I've met you, I'm starting to think it might work." She smiled broadly. "What a nice compliment," she said. Then she leaned forward across the table. "You know what? I think I'd like that." "Great," I said enthusiastically, and reached out to shake her hand to seal the deal. She laughed and shook my hand firmly in response. "For partners in crime," she said with a mischievous smile. Then she sat down and did something with her body that I didn't understand yet, and suddenly she began to radiate raw sexuality. I realized I had a hard-on. "Well," she said in a low, sexy voice, "now that we've taken care of the business part of our meeting, how about we move to a more comfortable place and relax?" My mouth suddenly went dry. and I had to take a sip of water before I could speak. No, I said. We just need to get to know each other better today. She smiled crookedly. Don't you find me attractive? Oh God, no, I replied, stammering. I mean, yes, but that's not the point. I'm just trying to focus on what we're planning to do here. And it would be better for me not to get involved with you like this, don't you understand? But I have something else for you. With that, I slid an envelope across the table to her. Earlier, I had put several large bills inside. She triumphantly took it, and it disappeared into her purse. Then she changed her posture again, and her sexy side seemed to recede. I think I understand, Michael. She tilted her head slightly to look at me. You're a very interesting man. I think I'm going to enjoy our little adventure together. With that, she stood up and left, leaving me sitting in the booth. For some reason, I felt drained. What a woman, I thought. We had planned for the first phase of Operation Honey Trap to begin on Saturday, right after lunch. The temperature in Atlanta had already risen, and I expected the pool at Eden Point to be crowded. I was a little worried that Rhiannon wouldn't show up, but shortly after noon, a BMW Z4 pulled up to my driveway. She walked up to my door with a small bag, and when I raised my eyebrows, said, "My swimsuits." She looked around and smiled. "So this is the suburbs. Do you like it here?" I frowned. Until recently, I had liked it. She stroked my cheek. "We'll fix that." At the club, we split up to go to the changing rooms and get into our swimsuits. As we had agreed, I went out first and found two deck chairs next to a table with an umbrella. I hadn't settled down yet when I noticed the burly Frank Calhoun heading in my direction. "Michael," he muttered, "I'm surprised to see you at the pool today. I would have thought you were taking lessons from a pro and trying to improve your tennis game." I knew he was trying to lure me in, but I replied firmly, "No, my girlfriend and I are going to relax in the pool and sunbathe today." Frank wasn't going to let me go that easily. "Oh, you have a girlfriend now? I'd like to meet her." By this time, our conversation had attracted the attention of everyone within earshot. That suited me just fine. "Well, you're lucky, Frank." "There she is," I said, pointing to the door to the women's locker room. Oh my God, the club fell silent as Rhiannon approached us. I expected her to be in a bikini, but to my surprise, she was wearing a one-piece swimsuit. But for some reason, it was much more seductive. It was made of some kind of silvery material that reflected the sun and attracted the attention of all the men and women. I heard a click and realized she had put on high heels. They made her calves, thighs, and butt look amazing. When she approached us, I shifted my gaze from her legs to her suit. It looked different, and then I realized it was made of the finest material I had ever seen. It perfectly traced the contours of her body, and when I looked closer, it became clear that the suit was completely unlined. It looked as if it had been painted on her body. She came up to me, intertwined her hand with mine, pressed her chest against my bicep, and kissed me on the cheek. "Great, honey," she cooed. "You found us a spot." Then she turned to Frank. "Who's your friend, Michael?" I looked at Frank and to my delight saw his mouth open as he stared at the vision before him. "Rhiannon," I said. "Meet Frank." "Frank, this is my girlfriend, Rhiannon." His mouth snapped shut, and he quickly extended his hand for a handshake. "Welcome to Eden Point," he said rather grandly. "If I can help you in any way, please don't hesitate to ask." Rhiannon smiled sweetly. "Oh, how nice." Turning to me, she asked kindly, "Is everyone here as nice as Frank?" I replied sharply, "No, Frank is unique." She smiled at him again. "Thank you so much for helping me feel at home." When he remained standing there, she looked down with a smile. "You can let go of my hand now." "Oh," he said, embarrassed. "Well, I have to go. I hope we see each other again, Rhiannon. I hope we meet again." With that, he turned awkwardly and walked back to the other side of the pool, looking back over his shoulder several times as he went. I looked over and saw Melanie sitting with her arms crossed. She didn't look happy. Rhiannon and I settled into a deck chair. She took my hand and pulled me closer so I could whisper in her ear. "I think it went very well." I squeezed her hand. "You were perfect," I assured her. She smiled and quickly kissed me on the lips. I know she meant it as a friendly gesture, but I could still feel her lips 15 minutes later. Then she stretched out on the deck chair, face down. "Michael, rub some suntan lotion on me, will you?" When I happily complied, I was sure I heard male moans nearby. For the next few hours, I think everyone who was at the pool that day tried to walk past us to get a look at my new girlfriend. I know for a fact that all the guys on my team stopped by, and after exchanging a few pleasantries, made sure to introduce them to Rhiannon. She was gracious to each of them and chatted with them like old friends. At one point, I leaned over and whispered in her ear, "You should go into politics." She just smiled and winked at me. In my line of work, I'm only one step away from that. I chuckled. When everything quieted down, she leaned toward me again. "What about her?" I knew exactly who she meant and pointed to Melanie on the other side of the pool. "Okay," she said, "leave that to me." She put on her high-heeled shoes and, clicking her heels, walked to the edge of the pool where Melanie was swimming. Bending at the waist, she took off her shoes and gracefully dove into the shallow water. When she surfaced, she tilted her head forward and then quickly threw it back, so that her hair formed a graceful arc above her head, spraying water into the air in a fan shape. I was completely enthralled. I had seen this move before in an advertisement, but I had never seen it in real life. It was stunning. Then Rhiannon gracefully swam out of the water onto the deck in one fluid motion. Standing facing Melanie with water dripping down her body, she tossed her hair back. Then she put her mules back on, adding 4 inches to her height, and walked over to where I was standing watching. I reluctantly looked away from Rhiannon to Melanie. She glared at me. Then she turned and addressed Frank sharply, grabbed her things, and headed for the exit. He followed her, glancing back over his shoulder at Rhiannon. She settled gracefully into a deck chair and closed her eyes. I heard her mutter, "Mission accomplished." While we were there was only one unpleasant incident. As we were getting ready to leave, I looked up and saw Penny walking toward me. Shit, I thought. I completely forgot that Penny's women's team was playing today. What am I going to say to her? "Hey, Michael, I'm so glad to see you out again. Maybe we could meet up and play some more." She stopped abruptly when Rhiannon stood up and grabbed my arm. "Oh," Penny said in surprise. "Who's that?" "This is Rhiannon, my companion," I said awkwardly. Penny blinked and stared at Rhiannon for a moment. Then she held out her hand. "I'm Penny," she said. "Nice to meet you." She turned back to me. "I need to clean myself up. I'm pretty dirty after our game today. See you, Michael." She turned and ran away before I could think of anything to say in reply. "Who was that?" Rhiannon asked curiously. "That was Penny Pennington," I told her. "She's my mixed doubles partner." "Interesting," she replied. I mentally berated myself for not thinking ahead about what to do with Penny. I didn't want to risk revealing my plan, but I also didn't want Penny to get the wrong idea. Damn it. Shortly after that, Rhiannon and I decided to call it a day. I felt like we had accomplished everything we wanted to do today. As we were leaving the pool, I could swear I heard the level of conversation rise noticeably. When we got back to my apartment, I let Rhiannon use the shower while I dried off and thought about the day. Except for the unexpected encounter with Penny, everything had gone better than I could have hoped. I had shown Melanie that I wasn't going to sit around mourning her departure for the rest of my life. What's more, I showed her that not only could I replace her, but I had also grown a lot myself. Let her think about that for a while, I thought triumphantly. "How did it go?" I heard a voice ask me from behind. Turning around, I saw Rhiannon standing there wrapped in a bath towel. "You were magnificent," I replied enthusiastically. "You were everything I hoped for and more." She did something with her fingers, and suddenly the towel slipped to her feet. "Don't you want to celebrate?" she asked flirtatiously. For a moment I froze, unable to breathe. Everything about her was perfect. She didn't have an ounce of fat on her. On the contrary, her abdominal muscles were well developed and attracted my gaze. From there, her legs, strong and perfectly shaped, seemed to stretch endlessly. I gasped and realized I was holding my breath. Pulling myself together, I stepped toward her, bent down, and handed her the towel she had dropped. "I'm sorry, Rhiannon. It's just not a good time." She smiled. "Okay, I was just checking." She threw the towel over her shoulder and walked away from me. My God, how had I not noticed her ass before? When she returned, she was already dressed and packing her bag. I handed her the sealed envelope. "Thanks," I said warmly. "Today was exactly what I wanted." She tilted her head again in a funny way and looked at me. "Do you want to get back together with Melanie?" she asked unexpectedly. I flinched. "No," I said firmly. This wasn't some one-time lapse in judgment or loss of control. She had deliberately thrown me away like a piece of junk. There was no way I would take her back. I thought so, she said, but I was just curious. Anyway, are we still working next week? Oh, of course, I said, smiling broadly. During the week, I made sure to go to tennis practice at the club. I wanted everyone to know that I wasn't hiding anymore. Glad to have you back on the court, our team captain said to me. My teammates greeted me with pats on the back and big winks. Behind me, I heard someone say, "Lucky son of a bitch." I smiled. I knew what kind of impression Rhiannon could make. A couple of days later, I returned to the mixed doubles practice court, but Penny was nowhere to be seen. Our captain told me she was sick. When I got home after practice, I called her right away. "Are you okay, Penny?" I asked. You don't sound sick." "Oh, it's nothing serious, probably just a little bug going around." "Is there anything I can bring you?" I asked. "I'd love to give you something." "No," she said sharply. "Thanks, but I don't need anything. Anyway, it's better if you stay away. I don't want you to catch whatever I have." "Well, okay," I said hesitantly. "But if you feel worse, call me right away. I'm worried about you." She gave me a vague promise, then said she needed to rest, and I let her go. I wasn't happy about it. Penny had always been so healthy and energetic that the thought of something being wrong with her alarmed me. And our little skirmish at the pool last Saturday probably didn't help, I thought. I still felt like I couldn't tell her about my honey trap, afraid of ruining everything. But I just didn't want Penny to get the wrong impression. I hope she'll forgive me when this is all over, I thought. The next step in my plan was scheduled for that weekend. The club was hosting a dinner party, and Rhiannon and I were planning to perform. When she pulled up to my house, she was dressed very differently from the last time we had seen each other. "You look like you just stepped out of a fashion magazine," I said, looking at her. She was wearing a casual outfit consisting of a skirt, a casual jacket, and a blouse. But although it all looked ordinary, the fabrics, styles, and accessories screamed high fashion. She curtsied like a little girl. "Thank you, kind sir. Actually, they just came out at Nordstrom," she said. "But don't worry if you're not familiar with those brands. Today, I'm focusing on the ladies, and one lady in particular. I can't speak for wives, but I think you'll have a great influence on men," I said sincerely. When we pulled into the parking lot in front of the club, Rhiannon turned to me and said, "We need to change our tactics a little tonight. We need to split up and talk to everyone there. That will allow me to do what I need to do." "Sounds good to me," I said. When we stepped into the courtyard where the dinner was being held, I immediately realized that we were both right. Once again, most of the men were openly staring at Rhiannon. The wives were a little more reserved, but even from them, I heard more than a few comments about Rhiannon's outfit that evening. A few more adventurous women asked where she had found her clothes, and soon Rhiannon was happily exchanging shopping tips with them. After chatting for a while, we returned to our meal. "Any luck?" I asked quietly. "Oh, I've been very busy," she replied seriously. "I've learned a lot about what the wives think about the situation with you, Melanie, and Frank. More importantly, I've been making your ex's life miserable. I've also been flirting a lot with her fiancé, and she doesn't like it one bit." I just smiled. It was obvious that Rhiannon knew exactly which buttons to push. I was chatting with one of my teammates when Melanie walked by and pointed at me. Curious, I followed her to find out what she wanted. When she turned to face me, I saw that her face was flushed with anger. "Looks like you're not wasting any time getting back into the dating game," she said sternly. "I didn't know there was a mandatory waiting period," I said sarcastically. "Oh, really? Well, I don't think you know much about that, Michael. Where the hell did you find her? I never met her when we were married." "I met her through work," I replied simply. "I'd be careful if I were you. She seems like more than you can handle." I couldn't help myself. "You're wrong, Melanie. I'm with her every chance I get." "Really?" she said eagerly. "Then you'd better keep her away from Frank." With that, she left. I smiled to myself. Everything was going exactly as I had hoped. At that moment, I saw Penny carrying a tray of food. I knew she was on the entertainment committee, but I didn't know if she would feel well enough to come tonight. I rushed over and grabbed her arm. She blushed when she saw me. "I'm so glad you're feeling better," I said to her. "You should have called me and let me know you were feeling well enough to come tonight." "I guess I wasn't sure until the last minute, Michael. Besides, I thought you'd be here with your new girlfriend, and I didn't want to bother you." At that moment, Rhiannon walked by, laughing and talking to one of my teammates. "And I see I was right," Penny continued, frowning. She started to walk away, but I grabbed her arm again. Wait, Penny, we need to talk about our next match. She hesitated, then seemed to make up her mind. Michael, I've had a lot going on lately, so I've decided to give up mixed doubles and focus on the women's team. I was stunned. You can't do that, Penny, I whispered. You're my partner. Who am I going to play with? Penny looked back at me over her shoulder, and when I turned around, I saw Rhiannon standing there. You'll find someone, Michael, Penny said. Please let me go. I need to clear the table. When I let go of her hand, she hurried away. Rhiannon took my arm and led me to an empty table. As soon as we sat down, she leaned over and whispered, Just so you know, that girl is in love with you. What? No, that's crazy. She is my tennis partner. She was in Melanie's Pilates class. And if I'm not mistaken, Rhiannon continued, ignoring me, you might be a little in love with her too. No, I protested. You're wrong. She's just a good friend. Maybe, she said skeptically. Anyway, I think we've done all we can for today, so let's get out of here. When we got back to my house, I asked Rhiannon to tell me what had happened with Melanie and Frank. She smiled smugly. I went over to where their food had been laid out and tasted it, making complimentary remarks. Melanie was clearly unhappy about my presence, but there was little she could say. So I told her how much I liked her outfit, and she was forced to respond with a compliment of her own. This gave me an opportunity to tell her where I had bought it. I realized she recognized the outfit and guessed how much it must have cost. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were almost green with envy. That's just like Melanie, I said. She's definitely into fashion and proud of her taste in clothes. Just then, Rhiannon continued. One of the other ladies asked Melanie to help her in the kitchen, and although she didn't want to, she had to leave me alone with Frank. As soon as she left, I went over and tried another sample of their dish. As she spoke, Rhiannon repeated her actions. I felt myself getting hot. She straightened up and smiled, clearly aware of the impression she had made on me. As soon as I got Frank's attention, I started flirting with him in earnest. I asked him if he played soccer, which gave him a chance to show off a little. While he was doing that, I walked over and stroked his chest. I remarked that he was much bigger than you and said that I liked big men. She giggled. I thought he was going to do it right there at the table. Wow, I said. No wonder Melanie was so hostile. I'm doing everything I can, she said with obvious false modesty. And I can't believe Frank will believe you're courting him, I added. She smiled mockingly. Guys like Frank are so self-sufficient that it never occurs to them to doubt a woman's interest. Ironically, they're usually the worst lovers. I chuckled. If Rhiannon was right, that would serve Melanie well. I handed her the envelope. Do you think we're ready for the next step? I asked her. Asked her. Definitely. The dancing at your club will be perfect for what we have planned. Then she turned and headed for the front door. What? No attempts at seduction tonight? I asked with a smile. She smirked over her shoulder. I wouldn't think so. Then she turned and twitched her hips slightly, making my loins twitch. When she left, I opened a can of beer and sat down to think about what had happened. On the one hand, I was very glad that the honey trap had worked. Although Melanie no longer wanted me, I knew she wasn't too happy about how quickly I had found someone to replace her, and even more upset that her replacement was much sexier than Melanie ever would be. It was all very enjoyable, but I couldn't shake the guilt I felt about the situation with Penny. Maybe Rhiannon was right, I thought. Maybe I really do have feelings for Penny. I had liked her from the first time Melanie introduced us. I found her attractive, slim, athletic, graceful, with an interesting, outgoing personality. But because of Melanie, I had always tried to keep our relationship strictly friendly and tennis-oriented. And I was sure that was what Penny wanted too, especially now that she was grieving the loss of her husband. I thought about what Rhiannon had said about Penny. It couldn't be true, could it? If Penny was interested in me, why did she avoid me like the plague? And why did it bother me so much, for that matter? Why did I constantly reject the sexiest woman I had ever met? Could my feelings for Penny be part of it? In the end, I gave up and went to bed. I didn't know the answers to my questions, and even if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do with them. I decided that the best thing I could do was to stay the course and focus on the plan I had made. The annual spring dance at the club was a popular event that always drew a large crowd. The ladies used the dance as an excuse to dress up, and the men reluctantly donned their sports coats, some even wearing ties. I was hoping Frank and Marlene would come. I warned Rhiannon about what to expect, and I was curious to see what she would wear to carry out our plan tonight. So I was surprised and disappointed when she got out of the car wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Sure, they were the tightest jeans I'd ever seen on a woman, and the t-shirt was indecently tight, but I was still expecting something different. My face must have given me away because she stroked it as she walked past me. You didn't think I was going to risk my dress coming here, did you? Just let me use your bedroom for a minute, and then I'll be ready to go. I was already wearing a sports coat and slacks, so I paced impatiently across the room while she got dressed. Damn, I chuckled to myself. It's like we're an old married couple. A few minutes later, I heard her voice. Michael, can you come here? I need your help with something. I went back into the house and opened the bedroom door. My God, there stood Rhiannon in the sexiest lingerie I had ever seen. She turned to face me again. Am I going to? She asked with a slight smile. I couldn't help myself and took a step toward her. But she stopped me, smiling and raising her hand. No, not now. I can't let you ruin everything. So now that I have your consent, get out of here and let me put on my dress. I think I was staggering as I walked back to the cubicle. A few minutes later, she came out. This time she was wearing a strapless dress, the same whitish color as the trim on her underwear. The color contrasted beautifully with her hair. As she walked across the floor, I realized that the dress must have been custom-made, because the fabric seemed to flow over her limbs like water. With every step, I could clearly see the contours of her hips, and when she turned, her buttocks arched in clear detail. The slit in the side of the dress reached the top of her stockings, and when she stood to my right, her perfect leg was on display. Of course, it didn't help that I knew exactly what she was wearing under the dress. I swallowed hard. I think you could cause a few heart attacks tonight, I said to her, and I wasn't joking. She just smiled and held out her hand for me to lead her out the door. The club's courtyard had been cleared for dancing, and paper lanterns hung overhead. It was a little tacky, but I liked the effect of the soft light and the tinkling music. Rhiannon slipped into my arms to dance, and I wasn't surprised to find that she was a much better dancer than I was. As we moved together, she rested her head on my shoulder, and in that moment, I decided that I didn't care that she was a working girl. I just enjoyed the feel of her body next to mine and the pleasure of her company. She lifted her head and moved back far enough to look at me. You know, this suburban life isn't so bad. A girl could get used to it. Before I could respond, she tensed. Uh-oh, battle stations. I turned and saw Frank Calhoun heading our way, dragging Melanie, who clearly didn't want to go. Hi, Rhiannon. Hi, Michael, he muttered. Very glad you decided to join us this evening. How about switching partners for a couple of dances? When I agreed, he swept Rhiannon away, leaving me and the clearly uncomfortable Melanie standing there. I held out my arms to her. Would you like to dance, for old time's sake? She reluctantly agreed. And when a new song started, I began to dance with her. It was an interesting experience. I loved this woman and had been married to her for 10 years. But after everything that had happened, all I felt was a burning desire to make her feel what she had done to me. So was our marriage really that bad? I asked. I asked. She sighed. No, Michael, it wasn't like that at all. We had some good years and some good times. But then everything went haywire. And after a while, I didn't feel very enthusiastic about our relationship anymore. And when Frank came along and made it so clear how much he wanted me, I just fell in love with him. I really fell in love, Michael. It was just like in college. She looked up at me. I didn't want to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what was right for me. Can you understand that? I understand, I said bitterly. You decided to change. That's not what I meant, she defended herself. It's okay, I said. I've changed too. She grimaced, remembering who I was dating now, and I felt a little satisfied. If everything went right from here, it would only get better. I looked up and saw Frank and Rhiannon walking toward us arm in arm. Michael, you're on a date again, Frank said with a slight smirk. Have a nice evening. Then he walked away, and Melanie tried her best to catch up with him. Rhiannon and I continued dancing. How did it go? I whispered in her ear. I could almost hear the smirk in her voice. He's hooked, she replied. He's sure I'm in love with him. He'll make up some excuse for Melanie, and we'll meet at the club after everyone leaves. I'm just a little nervous about the role. The timing has to be perfect, I told her. Trust me, women know all about these things. Then she licked my ear, and I shuddered helplessly. As night fell, I noticed that the crowd was rapidly thinning. I must have been looking around because Rhiannon caught me. Sorry, Michael, she said. Looks like Penny isn't coming tonight. Am I really that transparent? I asked her. Like glass, she replied, with a slight smile. As we walked back to my house, I reached into my pocket and handed Rhiannon another envelope. I may not have a chance to give this to you later, I told her, and I wanted to make sure you got it. She took it, almost reluctantly it seemed to me. For a moment she stared at me, and then her face changed. The sexy goddess had somehow disappeared, leaving only a real but still beautiful woman. That was the most unusual assignment I've ever had, she said, and you're unlike any client I've ever had. At times it was a little uncomfortable, I blushed, but I enjoyed it immensely. I took both her hands in mine. When I decided to get revenge, I knew I needed someone with outstanding qualities, I replied. But I didn't expect to find someone like you, and I'll never forget you. I leaned forward and kissed her on the lips. She held the kiss for a few seconds, then pulled away abruptly. She blinked rapidly several times, then said hurriedly, "Don't ruin your lipstick." Then she glanced at the jewel-encrusted watch on her wrist and added, "It's almost time, we have to go. Give me exactly 30 minutes. With that, she walked out the door, got into her car, and drove away. I stood there for a moment, then made up my mind. Rhiannon and I hadn't talked about this, and I hoped I wasn't going to ruin everything, but I had to take the risk. I took out my cell phone. She must have gotten my number. "Michael, why are you calling at this hour?" "Penny, I need to ask you for the biggest favor of my life. Please don't ask any questions, just meet me at the club in 30 minutes. "What's going on, Michael? What does this mean?" "Please, Penny," I begged. "I don't have time to explain. Please, just trust me. Just come to the club in 30 minutes. I'm sorry, I have to go." I hung up. As I headed toward the club, I wondered if she would come. The chances were slim, but I decided it was the only chance I had. When I got to the parking lot, there were 2 cars there. I took out my cell phone again and made another call. "Frank?" Melanie's angry voice came through the phone. "Where are you?" "This isn't Frank," I said. "It's Michael." "Michael, what do you want and why are you calling so late?" she demanded. "I'm calling because I know where Frank is. He's with Rhiannon." "What?" she screamed. "Where are they?" "Listen," I said. "Just meet me at the club as soon as you can." Then I hung up. Frank's house was a few blocks away from the club, but she must have been running fast because I soon spotted her running across the backyard of someone's house. I caught up with her before she reached the club. "Where is he?" she raged. "Quiet," I ordered, grabbing her wrist. "You have to be quiet so we can catch them." I led her to the club door, which was unlocked, and we tiptoed inside. As we entered, there was a rustling sound and the rustle of clothing. In the dim light coming through the windows, I saw Melanie's eyes widen. I quickly covered her mouth with my hand to silence her, then pointed to the light switch on the wall. She nodded in understanding, and we tiptoed over to it. I flipped the switch, and the room was instantly flooded with light. Frank let out a startled cry and tried to stand up, but his pants got caught on his knees and he stumbled and fell to the floor. He jumped back to his feet, frantically pulling up his pants. Behind him, Rhiannon rose from the sofa where she had been lying. Her dress was draped over the back of the sofa. She stood there wearing only her scandalous underwear, and no one had any doubt about what was going on. I had to restrain Melanie as she began to scream at Frank. "You bastard! How could you do this to me? We were supposed to get married." Rhiannon clung to Frank's arm, pressing herself against his back under the force of Melanie's anger. Now that he had his pants on, Frank's confidence returned. He looked boldly at me, then turned to Rhiannon and asked, "What do you want to do now, baby?" "Oh, Frank," she replied in a little girl's voice, "I just want to be with you." When she pressed herself tightly against him, he put his arms around her, protectively. Then he turned back to face us. Despite Melanie's suffering, his first words were directed at me. "Well, Michael, looks like you lost another woman." I didn't say a word, but Melanie cried out, "What about us, Frank? What about us?" The big man turned to her. "Listen, Melanie, we had a good time together for a while, but it's not going to last. I've found someone better and I'm going to devote all my time to her." He glanced at Rhiannon, then turned back to Melanie. "You can't blame a guy for wanting a change, can you?" Even though she was hurt and angry, Melanie couldn't help but glance at me guiltily when she heard those words. Rhiannon turned and deftly put on her dress. Then she turned and hugged Frank around the neck. He leaned down and kissed her. "Let's go, baby. Let's get out of here," he said, pulling her toward the door. You go, Frank, she said. I have something to say to Michael. Besides, I don't want him to leave my car here. Listen, I'll meet you at that bar. She reached into her purse, took out a piece of paper, and hurriedly wrote down the address. I'll be close by, honey, she added, stroking the front of his pants and giving him a passionate kiss. He looked at her doubtfully. Are you sure you'll be all right? He asked. I'm sure, dear. Michael wouldn't hurt me. He's not that kind of guy. Yeah, right, Frank sneered. You're probably right. With that, he walked out the door and we heard him drive away. While our attention was focused on Frank, Melanie managed to break free from my grip. She screamed, "You bitch!" and lunged at Rhiannon with her claws out. Instead of flinching, Rhiannon stood her ground. When Melanie reached her, Rhiannon took a quick step to the side, grabbed one of Melanie's outstretched arms and deftly twisted it behind her back. She winked at me. When Melanie continued to resist, Rhiannon said sharply, "If you don't calm down, I'll have to dislocate your shoulder." When Melanie stopped struggling, Rhiannon said sharply, "If you don't calm down, I'll have to dislocate your shoulder." Melanie stopped struggling, and Rhiannon pushed her away to face her. Listen, Melanie, there are a few things you need to know, she said. I don't give a damn about your Neanderthal ex-fiancé, and I have no intention of joining him at the bar he's heading to. Melanie was stunned. But why? Why did I seduce him? Because it's my job. I'm a paid escort. I've had dozens of guys like Frank. They all think they're God's gift to women and are always on the lookout for the next piece of ass. Do you think he loved you? The only thing he really loved was finally beating Michael at something. I'm sure he enjoyed having sex with you, but he enjoyed having sex with Michael even more. That's why Michael hired me, to get back at Frank a little and show you what it's like when your lover cheats on you. It hurts, doesn't it? Melanie screamed and lunged at me. But before I could react, a figure flashed in front of me and knocked Melanie to the floor. She lay awkwardly on the floor. Penny stood over her with her hands clenched. You deserve that, Melanie. After what you did to Michael, you deserve much more. Melanie just lay there and cried. It seemed to me that her feelings were hurt more than her body. Penny turned to face me, and I saw tears streaming down her face. Is it really true? She asked. She's really not your girlfriend? No, I said solemnly. She was my partner in the honey trap we set for Frank and Melanie, but nothing more. But she's so beautiful, Penny objected. I could never compete with someone like her. Rhiannon came over and put her hands on Penny's shoulders. Silly girl, I didn't stand a chance. He only had eyes for you. Penny looked at me again. So you never even… Rhiannon interrupted again. No, Penny, never. I could never distract him from you enough for him to touch me. And believe me, I gave him every opportunity. Penny said nothing but looked at me with shining eyes. Rhiannon grinned at us both. I think I'd better get out of here. I've got more important things to do, but I've done enough. At that moment, Melanie got up from the floor. What about me? Where am I supposed to go? I can't go back to Frank's house after what happened. Penny looked at her thoughtfully. I don't know what you're going to do tomorrow, but you can stay at my place tonight. I'm going home with Michael. With that, she kissed me hard. I took her hand and decided not to let go. But something bothered me, and I turned back to Rhiannon. What about Frank? Where did you send him? She laughed. It was the address of a gay bar I know. I wonder how long he'll stay there before he realizes I'm not coming. Then the smile disappeared from her face and she looked at me intently. Good luck, Michael. You're a special person and I won't forget you. She leaned forward and kissed me gently. I felt Penny squeeze my hand even tighter. Then Rhiannon turned to Penny, and her face took on a fierce expression. You will treat him right, do you understand me? If I ever hear that you don't, I'll come back, and this time I won't take no for an answer. The fierce expression left her face, replaced by what I later realized was an expression of sadness. She reached out and stroked my cheek. But I don't think I'll be that lucky. Then she reached into her purse and slipped something into my hand. Goodbye, she said, then turned and walked out the door, her hips swaying magnificently. I looked down at my hand. There were 4 unopened envelopes. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more videos.